Hey there, Brad Guy here again. I got Graham with me. We're going to look into some things today. I think that there's been some big kind of announcements in the game industry, specifically around the Activision Blizzard acquisition by Microsoft and all that that entails. So, why don't we just kind of touch base with that and see where it goes? So, I don't know, Graham, what are kind of your initial thoughts on it?
Well, to start off, I feel like if you're a big fan of the Blizzard IPs, you might have noticed in the past couple of years that they've been, I guess, left behind in favor of like the whole Call of Duty thing.
Hmm.
So at the very least, there is that. If you're a fan of those characters and games and stories, it's probably better for you.
Well, I think that that's
I
kind
know.
of the weird thing with the Activision Blizzard because it's like when they were purchased by Activision, there was like a weird priority thing happening there. And then
Yeah.
I say this all the time, but I feel like there's always like an underestimation of franchises that sell good enough, and
hmm
and what they do for the industry and the benefits of them. So I mean, Call of Duty is going to sell millions of copies no matter how it is. Really, like sometimes they're people say they're great, sometimes they're not, but they still sell like crazy regardless. And I think that, yeah, you're right. Microsoft would give it kind of an opportunity for all of the IP to have equal priority,
hmm
perhaps.
I feel like Microsoft has like their like industry viewpoint. They really look into the future. They look for like long-term growth of these story of these IPs and stories like that.
Yeah.
Uh, but I feel like Activision Blizzard on their own, they would really only kind of go for the short-term growth and the short-term money that would come from putting all their money into Call of Duty.
Yeah.
Like for like the past couple of years, a lot of the new Blizzard games have been like delayed, and a lot of the smaller support studios that Activision has have basically been going on. They've been doing like very like specific indie titles Activision owned, but prior to like now, but now they're basically just doing Call of Duty content. So
Yeah. Well, I always
yeah.
kind of, I kind of, there's a bunch of things I can kind of touch on there. I respect the cadence that big companies can pull off. Like releasing a big Call of Duty every year or every other year, even, is hard, even if you need to coordinate multiple teams to do it. You know, the typical
100%.
delays and stuff that come up, the compromises you might have to do in game design, trying to work out these features years in advance can be pretty difficult. Um,
hmm
and I've said kind of several things on the tech front where I think Microsoft's been a bit more future looking. Like they transitioned with the Xbox One era from treating their entire development ecosystem more like an API than like a development ecosystem. And that's gotten them a lot of flexibility. It's the reason it's been so easy. Not, I wouldn't say easy. It's still lots of engineering hours to get like backwards compatibility the way that they have, and
hmm
improving on past games through backwards compatibility or porting their games forward from Xbox to PC is easier than any other platform. Like when we did Star Renegades on PS4, one of the things that people don't really realize about PS4 is that Sony has their complete own shader library. So when you go through, you kind of have to make all equivalent versions of your shaders and like kind of rebuild all your materials from the ground up. And I mean,
hmm
developers that might already be in a workflow that's taking care of that for them, or more so. But that was a big thing because we ended up with some of our effects having weird behaviors on PlayStation when they were all great on Xbox because their API was so similar to DirectX and writing between like all our materials for that on PC, and we kind of got the Xbox port out of the all the platforms we ported for was the closest to free, and it's specific decisions that are kind of
hmm
future looking that Microsoft's made in that regard that's kind of given them the capabilities of even doing that. It's like Microsoft doesn't even need to really release a handheld. They can just give Steam Deck access for Xbox Game Pass. If they did a native app for it and had some way that they were rewriting, I don't know, I mean, it's the same problem that everyone else has that, I mean, Proton is essentially rewriting DirectX to Vulkan on the fly. So
hmm
I believe that's what it's doing. Anyways, someone smarter than me will probably know a bit more on that, but Microsoft would kind of need to solve that problem if they were going to release Game Pass on Steam Deck and do it natively, not through some kind of cloud support or anything like that. But I don't have as negative feelings of Microsoft as some people do, though I do have risks with acquisition. Like any,
Yeah, I have worries as well. It's the biggest thing is that it's gonna probably cost like a third. Well, not really a monopoly, but a third major wing of gaming. There's only really three. You have like Tencent owning a bunch of studios. You have Sony, then you have Microsoft. The two big three. They're way the after this deal is closed, they'll be way bigger than everything else.
yeah, it's kind of weird that
Um,
Nintendo hasn't gotten on
yeah,
it. Like,
I think they're fourth right now. So, well,
but they did
yeah.
they didn't even do what they could have done. Like Nintendo,
Hmm.
if you look at what Smash Brothers has become, Smash Brothers has kind of become an amalgamation of all Japanese gaming. With like,
Yeah.
yeah, there's the Minecraft guy, and yeah, there's a couple things from the West. Like you could argue Banjo Kazooie was more of a Western game, but
Hmm.
like the vast majority of characters that they always announce for Smash are kind of Japanese accumulated. I was really surprised that when the arcades were getting destroyed the last 2 years that Nintendo didn't turn around and buy Sega because they would get both Sega and Atlas in the acquisition, and then they would have Persona and everything under their belt. They already have good relations with Atlas on Shin Megami Tensei and other franchises. I mean, there's always the risk of like big companies ruining IP. Microsoft had a bad track record with that with the Xbox 360 era.
Until Phil Spencer came along and saved everything.
Yeah, well, I mean,
But
obviously, whatever
yeah,
team and whatever other shake up, because we went from like Fable being a pretty big success and then falling apart, and Rare becoming, oddly enough, like Rare just kind of falling apart after Microsoft's acquisition of them slowly. Although Sea of Thieves is pretty fun. Um,
they have a new title coming out. I think it's next year.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
curious how much of the any Rare staff that ever worked at Rare is still there. It's probably such a small portion
Mhm.
compared to when they were working on Nintendo IP. But
It's a
I'm
good thing that like Playground is getting like a crap ton of money just because Forza Horizon 5 broke a bunch of records. So probably going to be able to finish Fable in a realistic time frame, which is good.
Well, or just make it better and take the exact same amount of time they were planning to take
Yeah.
anyways. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think that there's some funny things from this, like Halo and StarCraft are probably now in the same universe. It'll be, or and maybe some of their other franchises combining with Warcraft. It's like I guess Age of Empires, but isn't Age of Empires based on our world? I don't even know. I haven't played Age of
I
Empires in like
mean,
10 years.
Blizzard in the Blizzard press release when they talked about the merger, well, not merger, but like purchase or whatever, they're
Yeah.
talking. They use the word metaverse bunch of
Oh
times.
yeah.
Some weird project they're working on, some weird metaverse conglomeration of all these different IPs. It's gonna be weird, but
Yeah. I mean,
oh,
Microsoft's kind of in the weirdest position in that they can kind of buy their way. Like, their money isn't coming
yeah.
from Xbox or even Windows at this point. They get good money from Windows, but most of the money's coming from Azure right now. And
Hmm.
which, for anyone who doesn't know, is Microsoft's cloud service, which is in some places number two to Amazon Web Services. In some regards, it's actually ahead in
Number
specific
one, yeah.
contracts and things like that. It's behind overall, I think, but it's easily one of the largest. So that's kind of printing money for them. I remember when Amazon Web Services started out and it was a money loss for Amazon at first, and it was a huge gamble for them. And then it became one of their biggest money producers over time. And Microsoft kind of followed suit, being the second big gamble. And that's how they're buying all these studios. Like they're going to make back this money from this acquisition. And you would say, oh, well, you're going to be looking at their gaming division to make back the money. But Microsoft doesn't have to look at it like that. They're cloud services can make it up in 6 months or whatnot, and then they don't even care anymore. And that's kind of, I don't know, that's the interesting thing. I mean, I think it's good for, obviously Blizzard's been in turmoil and we could talk about that, but like I don't want to get too controversial, but it's like clear some shady things were going on at Blizzard, and big
Yeah.
issues in terms of mistreating employees. I mean, I've worked at studios that have done that before and pushed people to that regard, and I know what it's like, and I know how when you're new in the industry. Well, you recall when you worked with me, I kept telling you to
Hmm.
calm down, right?
Yeah.
Because when when people first come into the game industry, they're so eager and they're so excited about this how special it is that they often get exploited because they're and like shame on companies who take advantage of that. Like it's a terrible thing to take advantage of, and I don't condone it in any way. I find like anytime that I've tried to on new art hires or 3D art hires, I try to do the exact opposite. I'm like, this is going to become normal to you in time, right? It's a job, right? It's like any other job. You're just grinding your 9 to 5. You're doing your best. Yeah, you get to work on better stuff. Like I'm not gonna lie, if my workflow, I know people that do crazy stuff for a living, and one of my close friends is a helicopter pilot, right? And it's like, and then when I tell him what I do for a day, it's like, oh, I drew a bear shooting a laser, and then I did, it's like he was like, oh, I saved this one guy from a burning vehicle, and I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
and have you seen my laser lizard? It's like completely aside to that, but it's always a risk with the game industry that exploiting people and trying your best not to. And I feel like when you look at what was going on in Blizzard, it looks like some pretty egregious stuff was happening with higher ups. And like, I think that a lot of people, I know groups of people personally that for the last 6 or 7 months, we're not touching a single Blizzard game. And then
That was me.
just out of pure distaste for everything that had been going on, all the news around it. And literally, the second that the acquisition was announced, they all jumped into BattleNet and were playing all the games that they missed. And I think that there was just something about collective guilt. They were feeling guilty. And then once they felt like someone that might handle this better in time, they felt less guilty about doing it. And I think Activision
Mhm.
Blizzard needs that. 'Cause I don't know if this didn't seem like one that they were going to recover from.
No.
It seemed like the accusations were too egregious and they had too much of a community that was hurt by it, that was invested in it. That seemed to be the two big weird things around Blizzard because, how many other companies are big enough to have their own con, right? Where they have like almost all the cons I've gone to, they have like dedicated Blizzard cosplay. There's so much dedicated Blizzard cosplay and all of these other things. And it's like StarCraft and Overwatch and World of Warcraft and like all of that has just been so big in the PC gaming space and the gaming space forever. So I don't know. I feel like it was such a big community that was really hurt by this. So and they love the franchises. And this is what kind of happens when a company goes into turmoil. They're not um they don't stop loving the games, right?
Hmm.
It's like
They hate the company.
they hate the
Yeah.
company. They don't want to feel guilty for enjoying the games, but they they're willing to not support the games for that period of time, but they do still love them, right? It's a game. It's
Mhm.
you're playing it. It's like something I've said often with games that people often don't know who works on games. It's not like a TV show where you see your actors or whatnot, even though there's so many behind the scenes people you don't see on movies and TV shows, all the, whatever key grips and, cinematographers and editors and like all that stuff is hidden from you, but you at least get actors and sometimes the audio people get enough of a bump that you get to see who they are and things like that. But with games, it's so much more obscured.
Unless it's like a world famous actor, a voice actor who's doing something. But
Yeah, yeah. It's like, oh, Keanu Reeves is in this game. It's like
yeah.
I more people know that Keanu Reeves was in Cyberpunk than can name a single staffer that worked on Cyberpunk.
Yeah.
So, which kind of is the issue with it, which is also why people are a little bit probably more willing to move on once they don't feel guilty about it and re-embrace the franchises once there's some distance from it.
Mhm.
So I think in that regard, it's probably good for Microsoft to have purchased them, especially because it didn't look like they were getting out of the turmoil on their own.
Like I don't think it was honestly just the whole like culture thing regarding cultural issues that Blizzard was having in the past couple of years.
Mhm.
I think ever since like around 2018, I feel like the quality and the output of content has just gone downhill as well.
Well, I know
I'm
people were
not
pretty upset
sure.
with even WoW Classic, weren't they? Everyone was super
WoW
excited.
class people, they were like excited for it, but like it wasn't really a huge investment.
Hmm.
I also think everything else after like World of Warcraft Legion has also been going downhill. Overwatch has had no content for the past 2 years.
Yeah, yeah. They needed,
There's just been delays upon delays upon delays for Diablo 4. Like, yeah.
yeah. This is controversial on my part because I am an old school Blizzard fan, but I'm not a modern Blizzard fan. I haven't been a fan
Hmm.
of Blizzard since Diablo 2 to like I think StarCraft 2 was the last game I really had interest in that they did. And that's just me
Hmm.
personally. I liked when their games had more of a different aesthetic. When, you know, like Diablo 1 is creepier than Diablo 3, right? They kind of created almost like a Disneyfication of Blizzard. They had a uniform art style that they carried across all of their franchises, even when it didn't make sense.
Hmm.
And while the art style was good, and I'm not bashing it from any technical or whatnot quality, it stopped the individual games from embracing what they initially represented. It's like, why do people still refer to the fresh meat scene from Diablo 1, but they can't name a single individual scene from Diablo 3? Right? Like, maybe they can. I just don't hear it. There's nothing iconic about it for me. Like, and maybe it's because I didn't play enough of it. That I might be guilty of it. Some Blizzard fans might be like, "You're wrong. It's this scene." I'm like, "Okay, sorry, I might not know that." But it's like even the music. It's like I remember going into the town every time in Diablo 1, like just walking into the town, and you get that like creepy, like music. I didn't even know, and
Hmm.
it was the closest thing to Solace, and you still felt creeped out. You felt, and it might have helped the context because I have kind of a funny story around Diablo 1, but um, which I could tell if you want, but whatever. Me and my brother, I don't know how old I was at the time. It was when Diablo 1 came out. We had like a Pentium 2 466 networked to, I think it was a 486 overclocked. And we had an IPX network, like a coax network, going from one floor of our house to the other floor. And we were playing Diablo 1 networked until like 5:30 a.m. And
Wow.
my dad woke up for work and we didn't realize it had gotten that late. And we were just like so hardcore in Diablo. Like we were going on the biggest Diablo 1 marathon. I think we plowed through like more than, I don't know, like two-thirds to three-quarters of the game in that one night. Like we were going nuts. And my dad heard us and we like hard powered off the computers and like ran to our bedrooms as fast as we could and like pretended to be asleep in our bed. And my dad
Yeah,
came up.
it's a similar thing with me. Like when I was a kid, I was one of I think a lot of people can relate to this. Like having like your DS playing it at like 2 a.m. at night when you're like 12 years old, same thing.
Yeah,
Like those
yeah.
memories. Games like Pokemon, what was it Pokemon Silver? Was it that's like big memory for
The
me, I
Game Boy
think.
one, the original
Yeah, the
release
Game
of
Boy
it.
one, yeah.
They re-released it
Yeah.
on the DS, but
Yeah.
Heart Gold and Soul Silver. But
Yeah.
yeah, but anyways, my dad came and he went into our bedrooms and he came right to our faces, like came super close to see if we were asleep. We're just like pretending to be asleep as much as
Yeah.
we can. We passed the test. It
Yeah.
didn't freak out or anything, but we definitely were playing Diablo and like way too late that night. And those
Hmm.
are kind of the good memories I have. Like we played Warcraft 2 the exact same way. I was big into modding Warcraft 2 back in the day, kind of drawing my own pixel art for it. I guess I did do pixel art back
Hmm.
then too. But we were modifying all the sprites for it and things like that and kind of my friend Andrew used to do that kind of stuff all the time. But it's like I don't know. I personally didn't I fell out of love with them. I think that a big problem with me is that I'm not a huge MMO fan, and then the
Hmm.
deeper they leaned on that angle, the more disengaged I was with them as a company. So, but yeah, that's my personal impressions, and probably why I'm less qualified than most Blizzard lovers to speak about it. But it's like all of my Blizzard love is so old, right? But I have lingering memories of the franchise, and Microsoft has the potential to bring them back in a way that I might even care about them more than
Hmm.
I have in recent years. Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, game game development is hard regardless. I'm kind of curious what comes out of this. I mean, obviously, when they were owned by Activision, I doubt resourcing and money was a huge problem. Anyways, I mean, Activision Blizzard makes money hand over fist. What has historically, they probably took a huge hit. It seemed
Hmm.
like the Call of Duty people were less willing to um, what's the term? I don't know. I can't think of it. To boycott them than the Blizzard
Hmm.
fans. But most of the allegations were more Blizzard based, weren't they?
Uh, e- the, well, I feel like Blizzard took most of the hits, but there was definitely a lot of um what's it called? There's definitely investigations going into a couple of the Activision studios as well. I think it was Sledgehammer that I had it. That was pretty bad.
Sledgehammer.
I don't think if Infinity Ward had like some overworking issues, nothing uh, like discrimination related. So,
I would kind of
um,
Infinity Ward. I'm curious what's even left of Infinity Ward because I mean, does Infinity Ward even work there anymore? Because I thought Infinity Ward
no,
broke off to do.
they were the major developer for Modern Warfare, the new one.
Yeah, but they broke. Okay, either they broke off or the team left, and I didn't realize that Infinity Ward was still because wasn't Titanfall and Titanfall 2 done by Infinity Ward?
Was it?
I think so.
No,
Let me
was it
check. Yeah, I think so.
Infinity Ward?
Titanfall.
That's weird. Then
Or they might have. Is it Respawn? Yeah. So Respawn is all
it was
X.
Respawn. Yeah,
It's all
that's
X.
EA.
It
That's
well, EA is the publisher, but Respawn is all ex Call of
yeah.
Duty employees. So
Really?
yeah, I'm
Okay.
pretty sure that I remember that the Respawn team was they previously used to be it was basically Infinity Ward left, formed Respawn, and
Hmm.
then I guess there's enough for Infinity Ward to rebuild the team more or less from it. But that was the huge split, and then obviously they went on to do Titanfall, Titanfall 2, and then Apex Legends was the more recent one. But I'm pretty sure that team was almost all Infinity Ward employees. You say something for a minute, and I'll look that up.
Uh, I think what else could we talk about regarding the situation? Ultimately, though, I think it is for the best for this whole transaction is probably really good for employees at least at Activision Blizzard.
Yeah,
It's probably going to be beneficial to most consumers just because in recent years, since Phil Spencer's been the leader of Xbox, it's been a lot more customer focused
yeah. I think this is.
and maintaining. Yeah.
I think that's something we can go into. I just wanted to clarify. So I did. It does seem Jason West and Vince Zampella had been leads at Infinity Ward, a subsidiary of
Mm,
Activision, and yeah, principal in Call of Duty, released Modern Warfare, but they left and they kind of basically created a new team that's kind of like
hmm.
Infinity Ward 2, and that's what Respawn more or less is. So, but anyways, like one thing we can kind of get into is I feel like Sony is doing the exact opposite. Sony's recent
Hmm.
CEO, like PlayStation's recent CEO, and all of that is making PlayStation worse, I would say. And Microsoft is actually gaining steam. And I've seen this with Game Pass because I typically game with two groups of friends. One of them is a PlayStation group and the other one's an Xbox group. And I never have issues playing games with my Xbox friends because some of them are on PCs, some of them are on Xbox consoles. They're all on Game Pass.
It just, yeah.
They're all on Game Pass and they just look for games that are on Game Pass and they everything they ask to play is in the Game Pass library. And it makes multiplayer so straightforward because with my PlayStation friends, it's like, do you own this game? Do you own this game? Oh, are you willing to buy this game? And then
Hmm.
it's like you have to coordinate all of that before you can even play online with them. But yeah, it's just like Microsoft's shown that they're respecting the history of games with their backwards compatibility. They've shown that, yeah, obviously the older franchises they care about. They've showed that they're at
They
least
also
willing.
really care about like niche subgenres as well. Like they have a lot of RTS games that are still being supported
Well,
and
yeah,
new ones that are coming out. Yeah.
yeah, well, and I mean, from my perspective, I've worked with Microsoft before.
Hmm.
Star Renegades was a Game Pass title, and it was a good, reasonable amount of funding. And for a lot of indie developers, that's the ability to make your game or not. And Microsoft's been, you could get into debates whether it's financially worth it. At the beginning of Game Pass, it definitely was because there wasn't as huge of a user base as there is now, where there is a chance that you'll cannibalize sales down the road with it, but not meaning to speak ill because it gives a lot of game developers money up front to make a game that they wouldn't have otherwise. And that's actually something that Sony used to be better at, and it seems like Sony has really distanced themselves from indie games, and they kind of lose out on. what they used to have in that regard. Like I feel like with the beginning of PS4, we're getting really, and the end of PS3, we're getting really interesting indie wave. Although Sony's fees for game updates were ludicrous initially. Every patch you did, you had to pay a ridiculous amount of money for, and you had to question whether it was even worth patching your game.
Like, what do you think Sony is going to do to compete with this huge
They,
in the event that like Call of Duty goes exclusive?
well, Sony doesn't have Azure money, right? Like they make
No.
money, but they don't make as much money as Microsoft by a long shot. Between the OS
Hmm.
and Azure, Microsoft makes, I don't know, its market cap's probably 10 times that what Sony's is. I'd have to look it up, but I would imagine it's something in that ballpark. But Sony is perceived as a higher profile in the game industry because of its legacy, obviously. And Microsoft has a problem
Hmm.
with their games not maintaining value, and they've kind of dug deep into that. So, like, I don't know, I'm a retro game collector, and Sony's games have maintained value forever. Like some PlayStation games are worth a lot of money now, right? And there's a perceived higher value. The same game, even though, and this is kind of an interesting thing, because a lot of those games look and ran better on like Xbox 360 than PS3. Like, whatever, Soul Calibur 5 or Silent Hill Homecoming or whatever the game is, it looked and ran better on Xbox than it did on PS3, but the PS3 copy physical is worth like sometimes twice as much money, despite it being an inferior version of the game. So there's a perception issue with value around Microsoft that has existed for a long time. Their games have dropped off in value faster on Xbox platforms, and if any console could have completely done away and gone digital, it's Microsoft for that reason, because gamers don't expect to have that tangibility maintain its value over time. And I mean, this kind of, but Sony is kind of pushing itself into that territory as well. I mean, everything's probably not going to be that physical in the future, anyways, but I think the perceived value is the same regardless. I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
I don't know, man. I feel like the biggest thing they could do to compete is maybe do some sort of subscription model or
With Game Pass,
like a Game Pass type thing, or maybe like some crazy deal. Like they have like their PlayStation Plus service, right,
well, they have
to
PlayStation
access
Now,
online
which lets
play.
them stream older
PlayStation Now.
games and stuff like that. Well, PlayStation Plus is their regular multiplayer online, and then PlayStation Now is their,
Maybe include like some sort of Xbox Game Pass type thing in that. Make it more competitive that way.
yeah,
I don't
like giving
know.
people more free games, giving them more online free games to play. I mean, they could try competing, or they can completely just rely on their IP strength and exclusivity.
Hmm.
Like, are they going to do a big purchase to counter this? I mean, all of their PlayStation has like a very specific image, where Microsoft's image is more general, I would say. And
Hmm.
because of that, Sony's kind of more limited in how it can expand. I
Hmm.
mean, it could probably turn around and buy like Sega and Atlas, but most of those games are associated with PlayStation, even if they don't purchase them. Like Persona, for instance. There's a lot of games that are big and they're associated with Sony, whether or not they're exclusive to Sony. And so I don't know what they would benefit, if they would benefit as much from the Game Pass service. And they also don't have the width that Microsoft has, which is like Microsoft has Windows. They have a large portion of people already in their ecosystem, whether or not they subscribe to Xbox. And they've done actually a good job having a value proposition added to the Xbox brand, where when they first were trying to combine Windows and Xbox, everyone hated when the Xbox bar popped up in their Steam game. It was like, oh, great, this
Hmm.
is more garbage. It's going to cause it to have weird issues. And then some feature isn't going to work properly because this keeps popping up instead of what I want. And they've really shifted that with Game Pass. And I've seen this with a lot of my PC gamer friends finally getting a Game Pass subscription. And they're just like, why would I buy this game on Steam? Actually, that's kind of an interesting way we can pivot in this conversation, in that Steam has kind of lost a lot of its foothold perceptually.
Hmm.
In the sense that for like a decade, Steam was exclusively associated with PC gaming. And Epic, through giving people a free game every week, has cut into that. And Microsoft, through giving people a subscription service where they already have a ton of games, is doing that. Because what people were afraid of with deviating and why they were so vehemently attached to Steam was that they were afraid of losing their library. And then essentially Microsoft and Epic's tactic is give them a library.
Hmm.
So, and I guess this is kind of Sony's problem too, right? Which is what we're all of this kind of, and then by buying Bethesda and then buying Blizzard and Activision, Microsoft just strengthens that library position. I mean, I guess it all comes down to library at the end of the day. I remember when I was a kid, game consoles felt more different. They felt more special. And even with like the PS3 versus 360, because the PS3 was so weird sauce with its, cell CPU and kind of not that great GPU. And then game developers were doing really wonky things with how they made games to make them look better because they had to leverage the CPU in ways that GPUs typically work. And then Xbox had more traditional, it's like you ended up with games that were kind of different and the platforms were important, but the platforms are much less important than they used to be. So I don't know. I I'm afraid of Microsoft becoming like a Disney because I don't like how Disney's kind of aggregated everything into itself.
Hmm.
And that's kind of the fear because Blizzard, even though when you look at the numbers, it only increases Microsoft's total game ownership from like 8 to 14% or something like that. I don't know when they work out the math, it's like the percentage of the gaming industry they would own is something like that. And it doesn't give them an outright monopoly. The perception around a company like Blizzard is huge.
Yeah. I feel like Blizzard, at least historically, has been kind of a very loved company.
Mm.
Well, besides the past couple of years, but just historically it has. I feel like just gobbling it up would kind of get rid of some of that identity. I don't know. Unless Xbox kind of keeps BlizzCon, maybe that'll help with that. I don't know.
BlizzCon brought to you by Microsoft, by
I don't know,
Xbox.
man. I'll keep it so maybe like Xbox is like running acting Blizz behind the scenes, but they still give them like the, I guess, illusion of independence to the public. I don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah.
The thing about like Blizzard in that regard, like, oh, what was I gonna say? It's I'm trying to think because it's like I hear what you're saying. It's these games are beloved. People are afraid of them being stepped on, but they also want them to thrive. Like, and it doesn't hurt Sony as much as you might think. Like the Call of Duty part probably hurts Sony more than anything because Blizzard's been
Yeah,
a
that's the
far
biggest
bigger
thing. Yeah.
PC franchise than console ever. I think
Hmm.
the deepest they got with console gamers is probably Overwatch. But
Yep. Maybe
so
maybe Diablo 3. I don't know.
well, I think Diablo 3 because the original release was so bad and then
Yeah.
the console version fixed a lot of issues and then they had to backport the console version over to PC and like all of the shenanigans around that kind of I guess they created that situation for themselves in that regard because they released a superior version of the product on console that wasn't available at PC at that point in time. I think that's one of the few instances where a lot of my hardcore PC friends were like, "No, you got to play it on PlayStation." I'm like, "What? You got to play Diablo 3 on PlayStation? What are you talking about?" Like, so I don't know. I mean, I am kind of the rate of acquisitions is getting a little bit staggering. I mean, the ones Sony has been doing makes sense. They bought Nixus, they bought Blue Point, which was kind of obvious. They bought who else did they
Would
buy?
Sony like buy EA or something? Because Xbox kind of has like industry leader studios in pretty much in most sectors.
Well,
Like
I
they have Bethesda for RPGs. They have
hmm,
Playground for racing games. They have Blizzard for MMOs now.
yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, they're buying up really specific things. Like I mean, acquisitions have to do with strategy more than anything else. So when Sony bought Nixxes, it's obviously to port their legacy titles to PC. When they bought Bluepoint, it's
Hmm.
obviously to remaster some of the most beloved games of all time with much better graphics, the same way they did with Demon Souls. I mean, they could hit Silent Hill, they can hit Metal Gear Solid. There's so many franchises that they could hit with Bluepoint that would make better versions of them. The stranger acquisitions were Sony buying part of Epic, and Sony,
Hmm.
even though it's still not much because Epic's huge, and then Sony buying the bigger one was Sony buying Evo, which, it's like there's a bunch of strange stuff around what these acquisitions mean. I think Sony and Microsoft, and this is, we can get into this talk. I don't know if we want to get into this talk, but a lot of this is metaverse related. And
Yeah.
at least ultimately, if not initially, ultimately, a lot of these companies like Facebook and whatnot are talking about it and thinking that because they're so big in social media, they'll be able to walk right into that space. But the difference between them is that they're going to announce their plans before it's ready, and Sony and Microsoft are going to announce it when you can interact with it right away.
Hmm.
And because they have a much bigger foothold in that space to pull that off. So, it's going to be
Like
like
I haven't used Horizon Workrooms, but I assume it's kind of just a waste of time. So
I don't even know what
yeah,
Horizons Workrooms is.
it's like it's the VR
Metaverse.
the Oculus VR thing they have for workplaces. It's very weird.
Yeah.
So
Well, I have an Oculus. I
yeah.
should mess around with it at some point in time, but I don't know if I would be impressed or bothered. But it's a like all of this is a plan, right? It's like obviously one of the most impressive things this current generation so far is the Unreal 5 demo of the Matrix
Hmm.
and what that means.
Yeah.
And having Lumen and Nanite and whatever the next iteration of those are, where you can get close to essentially having yourself in that space, a version of yourself visually represented in that space in real time and in any space, and having it lit and looking really good. And all of this is kind of tied to whatever these companies' future plans are. The engine tech is part of it, the game tech is part of it, and whether or not we can actually, like, what that metaverse will look like. It's like Sony buying Evo and buying part of Unreal in part of it. It's like, well, what can you gather from that? Are they imagining having like a version of like Street Fighter or the Street Fighter tournament or whatever it is, whatever's big, like Guilty Gear or whatever the big fighting game is, and having people like looking like they're right by the side of the fight as they're watching it? It's like there could be something interesting in that space, and that's what their metaverse looks like. That's far more interesting than a bunch of people just standing around in space jumping up and down or whatever it is that they're a lot of the competitors will try to do, because they just don't have the IP strength and they don't have the tech experience and the engine experience. But I don't know. Microsoft's
I
probably
mean,
got a similar thing.
doesn't Activision already own a sizable stake in Epic as well?
I'm
But
trying to
then if Microsoft buys them, would they own that stock? I don't know.
I you could I mean we could look at people who have ownership of Epic Games. I know a lot of it is Tencent.
And since I think it's 30%. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think Epic Games is still partially private though.
Yeah,
Um,
it's 50% private. Tim Sweeney owns most of it.
yeah, so it's kind of crazy. It's like I remember when the first games where I was like when I was early on engines before I knew a ton about game engines, trying to figure out what specifically was going on. Like I remember we were big with Unreal Tournament, right? And then Rune came out, which was this medieval Viking version of Unreal Tournament that was done by a different development studio, but it had Unreal's like branding all over it. And we're like, what the heck? And it took me a while to realize, oh, it's the same engine. It's using the Unreal
Yeah.
Tournament engine for Rune, which is why. And then this is kind of where it got, because like prior to that generation, that was like, I don't know, that was like late N64, early PS2, PS, like Xbox and GameCube, where we started seeing engine tech being the big players rather than it just kind of being some whatever bespoke thing before that. It's like you didn't get as much engine tech in the N64 PS1 era, but it's like, and then the trend to now where it's like if you were to try to write your own engine, you'd be so behind on almost everything that there's almost no point in doing it. And then like all of this kind of combines with all of this stuff. I mean, I could see Microsoft. I could see several things. I'm curious if Microsoft ends up kind of using this to push everything to a visual space where they can make everything behave side by side. This is kind of like the thing about what Blizzard was doing beforehand, where they kind of matched the art style of all of their franchises, right? They had all of these game franchises that have art styles that match, which makes it easy to kind of display them all side by side. And it's also what makes Smash Brothers work,
Mhm.
right? It's like Nintendo's always had that aesthetic in mind. You can put, Splatoon next to Fire Emblem, next to Mario, and it all kind of works together, even though the proportions change so much. There's like a universal handling of assets that Nintendoizes that. I'm curious if Microsoft and Sony are going to be going for that kind of approach. But with Sony, it would all have to be like hyper realistic. It's like Horizon to Last of Us to,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. Acquisitions. They're going to buy you up, Graham. You're going to
They're
be,
gonna buy me up.
yeah, you're going to be buying you
Only
up.
worth like maybe 50K. I don't know.
That's just your total lifetime worth.
My net value.
Your,
I don't know how much. There's a way to calculate that. I don't know how to do that though. So
but yeah, yeah, I don't know.
yeah.
Do you have any other thoughts?
I don't think so. We'll have to see what comes. I mean, I am a bit worried about once who the next Tim Sweeney is going to be of. Not Tim Sweeney, the next Phil Spencer of Microsoft is going to be, and how that's going to implicate on the industry.
Yeah, I mean, CEOs
Because
are
right
kind of a
now
weird
he's good
thing.
for, yeah.
It's like
It's like right
how,
now he's good for the industry, but like, well, what's going to happen down the road? We don't know. So
yeah, well, Sony's going to
yeah.
step up its game. I think, you know, t- I don't. Is it Phil Harrison? Who's in charge of PlayStation right now? Is it Phil Harrison? No, it's not Phil Harrison anymore.
I don't
It's
know.
but I'm not. I haven't been a huge fan of all the decisions being made there yet. So it's like I feel like Sony has been hurting. It's like, for instance, Sony closed down their Sony Entertainment Japan studio, which sucks
Mhm.
because all of their games were beloved, even if they haven't sold as well in recent years. So it's like it's this kind of tension with how who people runs that companies undervaluing these properties, and it's like what aspects of this Activision Blizzard acquisition do you think Microsoft's going to fund the smaller projects in there? Do you think there's going to be like some dead weight they'll cut off that you just won't see games from that anymore? Like what happens to Tony Hawk in this, right? Like
Yeah.
do those games die? Do they keep going? Like what are some other Activision? I mean, Activision's so huge. We should know more franchises than Tony Hawk and Call of Duty. But
There's Spyro.
okay. Is Microsoft going to revive Spyro? Are they going to, like I don't know. There's there's a lot of potential. I think I'm curious who Microsoft's going to buy next because is there an end to these acquisitions? Is kind of another question we can look at.
My internet just died. I apologize. I'm
No,
back
no,
now.
no, it's fine.
Sorry.
It's fine. Do you think that there's any other like Microsoft said they're not done acquiring? Like, do you think there's anyone else big in the pipeline?
Fire or
Yeah, to acquire. Do you think? I know that they've really wanted to have more of a Japanese foothold, so one of the big acquisitions they'd be looking at might be a big Japanese studio. But
that's possible. Yeah.
I know that Japan is also harder to acquire things within.
Look into that market. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's Japanese laws that make it hard to own Japanese companies. But anyways, I'll give you a second for your internet to catch up, and then I'll probably wrap this one up.
Sorry.
It's perfectly fine. Thank you so much for coming on, Graham. It was
No
interesting. I
worries.
mean, it's a lot of just speculation and rambling, but hopefully someone out there gets something from it. And
Mhm.
I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.